And welcome to another Austin Software Cooperative Meetup. This is October 2023. We are going to be continuing with companies we keep, employee ownership. This is part 3. We'll see if this makes it through the book. Otherwise, we'll continue on. We're going to jump right into the chapters where we were, and Watson, take it away.
All right, thanks. We are going to go straight to chapter 4, challenging the gospel of growth. So if you remember, they have different principles, and challenging the gospel of growth is one of the principles. We'll try to get through this principle, balancing multiple bottom lines, and possibly the spirit of craft. And we're going to be going a bit slower because that's what people were requesting. So to start out, the author says business literature contains surprisingly little that questions the advantages of growth or that considers optimization of size. In fact, conventional wisdom implies that small businesses are those that just haven't had greater success yet. So within this chapter, and the author has lots of sources, some studies, most of which are kind of maybe books. And I was pretty surprised. A lot of these books I have not read, so some of these will make for good follow up. So here it says economist Herman Daly explains this distinction. To grow means to increase in size by the assimilation or accretion of materials, while to develop means to expand or realize the potentialities of, or to bring to a fuller, greater, or better state. So there's kind of a difference between develop and growth. One of the companies the author highlights is Patagonia. I guess the CEO says, well, the name of his book is called Let My People Go Surfing. And they say they don't want to be a big company. They say we want to be the best company, and it's easier to try to be the best small company than the best big company. So then in the beginning of this chapter, he says, talking about the company, which is called South Mountain. This is the company of the author, the company that the author started. They say there are no outside investors and no non-employee board members at South Mountain. Each owner is an employee. We decide what kind of business ours will be. The decisions are partly economic and partly philosophical, and the people making them have well-aligned interests. Our considerations have led us to believe that if our business practice is not governed by an unquestioned growth imperative, we will have greater flexibility and freedom, and the character of the business will better match our aspirations. So I'll stop here. Does anybody kind of think, when it comes to growth, uh, does anything jump out at you as problematic, from right from the start when you think about growth in business?
I guess if growth is set as the important goal, the most important thing ahead of all other things, then it starts to everything else can be minimized. It's growth is, I think I was seeing something like growth is, as far as like trying to make money or whatever, growth is more important than efficiency. So companies that try to focus on efficiency, you can do really well. I'm more talking like just in general or capitalistic companies. But growth focus is even more. And that can tie in with, I guess, knocking out a lot of other things. But that's what jumps to my head. It doesn't mean don't
Yeah.
do it, but it's just, is that your goal?
Yeah. Anyone else? This this chapter has an interesting link. I believe it's this chapter. Yeah, between the drive for, let's say, spreading the principles. If you believe that your principles for the business ought to spread uh, throughout your community, throughout your country, your world, or what have you, that it seems like the people that are kind of the growth evangelists, let's say, uh, they kind of tie that in with the growth, with the spread of principles, and it may be a overreach, or I would say it's an overreach given this chapter for sure, is what the author's saying. Um,
What do you mean by it's an overreach?
well, like growth, especially here in the United States, when we think of growth, we think of money. We don't, and then any principles that get spread, like let's say, I don't know, Southwest Airlines says, "Hey, we wanted to make it uh, to where it's affordable for anybody to fly, across the country or whatever." So flying is like riding on a bus, really, the price that you're going to pay. That principle is there, and it gets tied in with, oh yeah, but we're about making money. People really cite Southwest Airlines as uh, being profitable, even when the other airlines are going bankrupt. So they look at them and say, "Oh, they have great culture. Ooh, they have this, you know, other things like that." But they don't really. It seems like the uh, the desire to have people have affordable travel is tacked on to, it's like 90%, oh, we're here to make money, and 10%, here's this little good thing we could do. But I think in our culture, in United States, we think of it as 50-50, maybe, some kind of thing. We think of the entrepreneur has this idea, everyone in the world have a personal computer, everyone in the world have affordable travel, everyone, and then we think that they make the world go round that way, and so we tie it together, uh, and then we also say that's the only way that it can be, and I think that's what he's challenging, that, uh, and so he's going to get into that down here. Um, so let's get to that. So why growth? One question I ask is why, when talking about money, why not make just enough money? That's one thing I'll ask. So let's see here. Growth doesn't need to mean more of the same, but leaner or deeper. supporting improvement rather than expansion. Bigness, he maintains, can lead to reduced focus, excessive complexity, and less effective control. And he cites, I guess, the small family firms that are in Germany. They have tried and tested great advantage. They're content to corner and dominate one small niche market through the constant improvement and innovation. Evidently, that's a thing there. So let's go to South Mountain. So the general idea here with what happened with them. Let's see if we're in the right place. Yeah, and this is basically anybody that's been with any business is going to have these growing pains. So what you call growing pains. So you get more projects, and then you have to hire more people, and then there's more stress because there's more people that could very well do things differently than what you're used to. um, that kind of thing, bringing too many people on too fast, that kind of thing. And so that's what they experienced. This was around 1994. So what they did is they started having a bunch of meetings, getting feedback with the owners. They wanted to make sure that they highlighted things like when we hire an employee, we're extending a commitment to that individual, and we're not expecting to let him or her go sometime in the future. And one of the things they claim is that they never had to let someone go because of lack of work in 30 years. This here is, I think this is all good for people that are, struggle with business and this growing pains to realize. So fluctuations in workload and new opportunities can be handled in a variety of ways, but not by adding employees unless we are willing to accept permanent, at, as best we can tell, growth. Adding workload without increasing staff, on the other hand, leads to added stress. So this is the dilemma. Longer hours, more to juggle, less attentiveness, and possibly diminished quality. Nobody feels good about that. Achieving a delicate balance among a number of employees, workload, and workplace harmony is a constant and unremitting challenge. Right. So here's kind of their. I think this is part of their solution. We try to remain flexible and open to the excitement of new opportunity. We found that we can increase capacity without growth by developing new kinds of connections. Over the years, we have cultivated a group of relationships with small architecture firms and craft-based general contractors. If we wish to accept work that will exceed our capacity temporarily, we ask these companies to join us. We make it attractive for them to join our office staff or job site crews. For them, it's an opportunity to work with a larger company without losing their independence. And this is how they solve that problem. What do you all say to that?
I think I like the fact that in order to make that decision, again, it's not a gospel, it's not the goal necessarily, but there's nothing necessarily against it. It's just that the how you do it is important. And that's where the values, the agreements of the owners are important, right? And not get, persuaded and flashed by this very exciting opportunity. But at the same time, yeah, but we're not going to be able to pursue this without violating some of the basis of why we're here together or working together. So I think that's interesting. Always thinking that there are many ways to grow, and it's just a matter of picking the ones. I know what's the ones that if you're only about profit, I know it's going to be the fastest, and you're going to make that call between the risk and the amount of resources you're going to put in. It's going to be like not very human friendly, if that makes sense. But if that's not necessarily the gospel, there are so many other ways, right? And I like that ultimately it's whatever people decide.
That is really good input. That's a really good assessment of what they're saying, I think. Um, this is a challenging problem. It's a chicken and egg, and I've always wrestled with it, thinking about it. And I think the way that they solved it here, cultivated a group of small and then complementary firms. It seems like, okay, but how do you do that, right? And how do you build those relationships? What does that look like? And then it's kind of the answer. We make it attractive for them to join our office staff or job site crews. This would be something I think that might be the key, because we talk about cooperating with others, but that cultivation of the relationships and all that, that takes work. And it's not like you can sign an agreement. Yeah, I mean, you can sign an agreement with someone and say, okay, this group is good and we'll bring them on for this or what have you. But um unless you're like talking with them often, it doesn't really seem to it seems like it doesn't really uh pan out. It seems like you have to have ongoing this cultivation portion. It seems like this needs to be ongoing. Like maybe this is why people play golf or something with each other. So that kind of thing. And then you can bring them in when it's time. Taylor, what do you think?
It sounds like they're expanding what they can do through like networking with other companies and outsourcing work that they don't do. So we've done this for stuff like UX experts where they're PhDs in psychology for usability and stuff. And I'm wondering if it's like that or if this is more of a in Spiral or Mondragoon, where they're all part of the same larger umbrella or group and share more of the same culture. So that's what I'm not quite understanding with this.
I think it's the former. I just think that they have an ongoing cultivation process or something like that.
So that seems like just good in general, not specific to cooperatives, which is okay. I mean, the majority of everything we do is we first are looking at external. So just in general, ensuring that part of your ongoing, just like sales, I guess, when you de-emphasize sales because you're doing fine and then now you have to try to ramp it up rather than saying you need to put some percentage always into finding new work. So it seems like you should do this. Always put some percentage of time, quarterly or whatever, into cultivating these relationships. I definitely think it's better to collaborate with an external group that you're already comfortable with rather than just trying to go and say, okay, who seems to do good work based on whatever, it's similar to looking at a resume for an individual, an entire group portfolio.
Yeah,
So just a good practice to have.
yeah. The numbers on this, I wish we saw that. Like how much time do they spend cultivating? But okay, let's move on. Let's see here. Okay, one of the things I'll do an overview of this. So, one of the things with growth is the growing pains of hiring new people that aren't part of the culture. And so the way to combat that is you hire people that you think are a good fit and then you train them. And they said that repeatedly that they prefer to do that. So, like here, um, what if an efficient bookkeeper is a mediocre interior designer? What if the steady carpenter invests money unwisely? So far, our experience has been positive whenever we made such moves, right? So this bookkeeper, they had them move over to doing other things. Um, Recently, we have made education a priority so that we can create more opportunities for employee enrichment. If we continue to hire for ownership potential rather than specific skills, we are likely to have a versatile workforce in years to come. Yeah. So that ownership potential, that's their main hiring, um, I guess, criteria. People that are a good fit to be owners. So this rule of 150 in this franchising, my third time going through this, I feel like this got connected for me. I don't know if anybody has heard of this Dunbar rule. It's pretty popular um, in certain circles.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. So the Robin Dunbar, who, in the interest of learning about optimum size, has studied how groups of varying numbers work. A striking collection of examples supports his conclusion that there's a rule of 150, which says that 150 is the maximum number of people who can share a social relationship with one another. The number reveals itself in a variety of interesting settings. Dunbar looked at 21 different hunter gatherer societies around the world and found that the average number of people in each village was right around 150. The pattern holds true for military organizations whose planners have a rule of thumb for the size of a functional fighting unit: 150 to 200 soldiers. Reduced hierarchy, fewer rules, and fewer formalities are required for the group to function as a team if it remains at that size. Group behavior operates on the basis of personal loyalties and relationships in a way that is impossible with larger groups. When a colony begins to approach 150 members, their policy is for that group to split and a new one to branch off. The leader of the Hutterite colony told Gladwell, keeping things under 150 seems to be the best, the most efficient way to manage a group of people. In the Gore-Tex company, which makes a variety of high-tech products, it's widely considered to be one of the most consistently innovative, best managed, best to work for companies in the United States. It's a $2 billion enterprise with 8,000 employees and some 50 locations worldwide. Each location, whether its primary function is administrative, research, manufacturing, or sales, has no more than 150 people. And then they have associate stock ownership program. So this whole 150 seems to be uh, kind of some type of rule of thumb. This whole part with the military, that always seems weird. Like I don't really know what they're saying there. Uh, I don't know about 150 rule. I'm trying to think of what would be the platoon being 30, the series being 3 platoons, and company being 3 series. Maybe that 180. I don't know, but yeah, not familiar with that. But that's fine. A rule of thumb that I've seen in military, or at least Marines, is one human can't really keep track of more than 3 or 4 things. That's the rule I've heard, but that's fine. So
I like the other part of the rule where the 150 is the top level, but then it goes down the steps, 50, and then for what, well, they're talking about friends, but I mean, you could tie this into other things. So about 50 that you consider friends, and then 15 is your close knit circle, and then only 4 to 6 would be your closest or familial contacts. Um, it,
yeah,
and there's a ton of studies that are continuing on this. I mean, it seems like it's still valid, and they relate it to all sorts of stuff, including I saw years ago something that was talking about Facebook and everything else. So that was a big norm going into, all age groups by this point. And there's probably stuff there that you could look at when you're looking at like teams and working on stuff, if you're talking like projects or whatever, and
yeah, that's where I think
that smaller groups. So then like 15 kind of seems, when I think of like a healthy open source project, and you're
pizza,
saying like 15, what's that?
the pizza theory, like people that can share a pizza.
Oh yeah, yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Um, so like 15 people working on a project that you just say, in general, these are the contributors. You get random little bits, even if some, maybe someone every once in a while contributes something big. It's not often. And then 4 to 6 people that are contributing 80% of the work on the project seems, I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying this stuff. I don't know if this would be true directly for open source projects, but it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, you have that rule of collective action too, that small groups can violate the collective action principle, that basically you can have, you know, I'm gonna butcher the principle, but just say like the Pareto principle: 20% of the people can do 80% of the work. Small groups can, you can have a smaller amount of people do outsized work and it still be consistent and sustainable. But as it gets bigger, the free riders will ruin it. So
Mm.
you have many kind of principles about the size of groups and what they can do and boundaries and things. Um, it's quite interesting. But this rule of 150, and so keep that in mind. About 150 people, but let's say that you have these principles like what they have principles of employee ownership, and you would like to expand these principles to other people, other groups, so that they can do business like you do, because you think that's a better way to do things, more fair, more equitable, all kinds of things, reasons why. And you have this rule of 150, so you can't really expand over that, possibly. Okay, so what about franchising? So what's a franchise? A franchise is a business that is authorized to sell another company's goods or services in a specific area in exchange for an agreed upon startup fee and regular royalty payments. A company that has been successful with a product or service can use this method to extend its business geographically. If we develop a service, product, or business model, right? So that's the thing, principles that improves people's lives. We would want to make it available to many people as possible, right? That so um This portion is about that. Okay, so there are two types of franchises, those that distribute products and those that distribute business formats. So this business format, kind of making something idiot proof, if you could forgive the expression. That's kind of what I think that they're talking about here. So skipping over to Great Harvest, this to fast forward is, I believe, a cooperative, and they are a bakery. They are a franchise. So here's some cool things that they do. Um, they allow others to license what they do. They make sure they put craftsmanship first and all this other stuff, quality, all that. Here's some other things that are different. The royalties that the bakeries pay decrease every 5 years. So again, if you could think of a another franchise like GNC, the I think it's General Nutrition, um, you know, supplement store, right? If you do a GNC, I don't think your royalties decrease at all. You're always paying the mothership forever, right? They give you the model, they give you all the branding, and you buy all that stuff from them. But you have to continue to purchase all your stuff from them, all your, supplements, all that. Here, basically, they're saying over the long term, they've, let's say long term franchises need less support, and that reduces the front office workload. So basically, they're not having to support them, not having to tell them best practices, all this stuff like that. And so this is a way to create and replicate yourself. And so you're establishing these principles. So if you compare this to what we were saying before, so talking about growth and saying, well, one of the arguments of growth is the entrepreneur that says, hey, I want everyone to have a, like Henry Ford, everyone with a car instead of a horse, that kind of thing. There's something about that we latch on to, that we say, yeah, there's something noble about that. Um, this says, okay, there's a way to do that in a principled fashion that doesn't put growth, the profit growth, as a high priority. It puts the principal growth up at a higher priority, higher than normal. Um, yeah. So, what do people have to say about that?
I mean that I don't know, ideal, like very fuzzy ideal. I mean, okay, it's okay, fine. Yeah, people would be cool if people had cars. That doesn't mean that your company has to build all of them and penetrate the market in a way that has incredible competitive advantage based on size, right? So I don't know. Yeah, it's like phones. Yeah, but you don't have to be the only one. There's going to be plenty of other people that are also going to be building on your invention, right? So to me, it's also like very at least there's a slice of that. There's a little bit, egomaniac in a way, right, or megalomaniac. Um, well, another comment I wanted to say was that you can also grow to. It's almost like more is less because you want to add, let's say, 10 more people to the company, so you can, let's say, produce an output of of the, okay, let's say 10% more head count, and maybe you produce 20% more, right? Because of economies of scale, which would allow you actually to all of you, including those 10 extras, to work less. Why not grow to work less?
I think that's a really good point, and um, I'm forgetting Richard Wolff. That's one of his points. He says that capital will go ahead and uh, create some type of innovation, some type of efficiency, and then use that to capture more of the market, make a bigger profit. Whereas workers, if they were the ones voting on where the surplus goes, they would say, "Oh, the robots help us to be more efficient. A 30-hour work week instead of 32-hour work week instead of 40-hour work week because we're producing the same output, right? So let's do, like see that's an option, just like what you're saying. 100%.
Yeah, and again, you can do it that way, which is, oh, we are actually going to cap our growth, which I think is a little bit artificial, or just say, no, actually, we can grow. It's just that if we grow, we're doing it for this reason, right? So okay, fine, let's grow, but let us work less, okay? And if we grow beyond that, oh, apart from working less, we have more profit, so we can improve our material conditions. Oh, great, right? But that's our priority, right?
Yep, that makes sense. Anyone else? How much time do we have? We got another 15 minutes. Let's jump on over to 5 multiple bottom lines. And I want to get to this here. I want to get to that one. So I'm going to go fast. Well, okay. So multiple bottom lines. Using money as a sole measure of prosperity fails to recognize that people have lives, families, communities. Many people value the quality of their work environment as much as or more than the size of their paycheck. In addition to making reasonably good living, we need to be satisfied by our work. Our third cornerstone principle is balancing multiple bottom lines, which consigning profit to its while consigning profit to its appropriate role. We need to account for multiple bottom lines. Usually, companies that try to do that have added environmental and social accounting to the traditional economic tracking to make a triple bottom line. I can go into this. So basically, you can exploit that if you measure it. There's a way to measure it in such a way to where you say, look, I'm a good boy or girl, but you're not really a good boy or girl. Let's just go through that quickly that way. So South Mountain claims no triple bottom line. It's basically metaphorical, right? They say that they'll do all of the three, this trifecta, this environmental, of course, there's the regular bottom line with the economic, but you have the environmental and social. But it's metaphorical, so they'll go ahead and use our own, I guess, what do you want to call it? Qualitative measurements instead of quantitative. They didn't say that, but that's what I'm saying. So all right, let's move down. Growing pains. They were having growing pains. They went and had a meeting and they were saying, oh, we're not satisfied with work. What are the things that we're not satisfied with? Okay. And what are we satisfied with? What do we not want to cut? So they came up with these um, different statements. And these meetings, that's part of how the author is communicating basically how you do employee ownership. You have these meetings, people get together, You gather their statements, and then you learn together, and you make decisions based off of the statements. You move forward from there. So this is one of those times. Um, so they said they would be less happy at work if South Mountain were less concerned with social progress. So they put that as a high priority. They said they should have a formal annual evaluation system and an equitable, accessible wage schedule. Okay, they have that. Job security. Okay, this is one of those things that every business consultant and every economist is going to say, you can't do this. And within cooperatives, it is one of the high priorities, something to always point out. We should continue to build our reputation as a socially engaged company. And they want a diversity of work opportunities. Basically, people don't want to be, they want to be fulfilled at work. These are things that the triple bottom line thing, so economic, social, environmental, this is what they decided are their bottom lines. And again, when I'm saying bottom line, what is this? The balance sheet, basically, the whole what is it? How much money have you made? That's really what they're talking about with this bottom line. It's a way of measuring your business. So, um, to say if you have profit or whatever. So, uh, growing pains. All right. With overload, schedules, budgets, wages, there was a lot of information. So they started becoming more and more transparent about everything. And people were saying, I'm overloaded. I'm overloaded. Okay. So new knowledge is sometimes tough to swallow. And then they said these tensions reflected our development into what the former Royal Dutch Shell Director of Strategic Planning called a learning organization. In our case, we were learning to balance multiple bottom lines. So all this information, people started internalizing it, and they started saying, yes, here's what we don't want to do, here's what we do want to do. And it's going to be a growing pain. You're going to have to deal with all of that data and make decisions and trade-offs on things other than profit or your bottom line, right? So under the bottom line, it could be red, that's you're in the negative. It could be green, you're in the positive. You want to be green, not just on money, right? You have green on for them, environmental, for them, social. You want to be green on these other ones too. That's the idea. So here, I thought that this was um, important. So they had a discussion about how they were going to approach one of their bottom lines. The author, who was kind of, he was the executive and the founder and all that. He said, "Oh, we're going to label ourselves as ecological builders," and people immediately had a strong negative reaction, right? And they said, "Well, that seems presumptuous," right? And they basically said, "We want to show. We don't want to. We want to demo it. We want to show it. We don't want to say it, right?" And so they preferred silence. So within that whole back and forth, this conversation, that conversation, he's saying that is what the multiple bottom lines represents. You're going to have a back and forth on people saying yeah, I don't value that, or I do value that. And that value, it could not be profit. It could be the other thing that you value for them, um, environmental or social. And that back and forth has to happen in order for you to identify the bottom lines, right? Again, it goes back to they don't measure, they don't measure it, right? They uh quantum quantum they don't quantify it. They don't put a number on it, but they do go through this process, and then through the discussion, they come up with the multiple bottom line. That's really it. So, what do you all think about this multiple bottom lines concept before we get into this last part here?
It sounds good. I mean, to me, it seems like a different way of saying what do you value and what is going to motivate you. And then I guess codifying how you're going to find that and then agreeing on it as a group. These are what we're going to focus on ahead. It would drive everything else and the conversation to get there.
Yeah. This is the kind of concept to me, like how he's saying, this basically took 30 years to figure out. Um, let's jump over here. I think this might be one of my favorite parts, or this might be my favorite part of the book. I don't know. So he's talking about an author. Oh, let's go up here. You read the book No Contest, The Case Against Competition, a book by an educator and social theorist, Alfie Kohn. Okay, so it's about that. Uh, he's saying that Kohn said, when we think about cooperation, we tend to associate the concept with a fuzzy-minded idealism, or at best, to see it as workable only in a very small number of situations. Okay, um, cooperation is a shrewd and highly successful strategy, a pragmatic way to get things done effectively. But we have been trained to compete and, more important, to believe in competition. The message that competition is appropriate, desirable, required, and unavoidable is drummed into us from nursery school to graduate school. The results of this teaching, which permeate every lesson, are used to prove competition's inevitability. If you make it so, of course, it will be so. He also thinks teachers don't understand the concept of cooperation. They use it to refer to obedience. To cooperate for them is to follow instructions. Let's go ahead and say, okay, so here's a study by David and Roger Johnson. Essentially, the results of the study, 65, or sorry, this is like a meta analysis of a bunch of studies about cooperation. So 65 studies found that cooperation promotes higher achievement than competition. 8 found the reverse, and then 36 found no statistically significant difference. So the superiority of cooperation held for all subject areas and all age groups, right? So 65 out of 22 showed benefit to
But
cooperation.
that's as far as output.
Mm-hmm.
So only I wonder what those look like as far as, okay, how do you feel about, whatever they measured, those other qualitative aspects of how people feel, if they feel engaged and all that, as opposed to stressed out.
Mm, like if they
As opposed to just being a matter of are people productive or not productive, which is like really like the older paradigm, right? Competition is just a way to squeeze people, right? Do a system in which you extract as much as possible.
so how do they measure higher achievement is something we need to look into for this meta analysis is what you're saying.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that higher achievement is probably a set of goals. Yeah, the traditional productivity mark. What I'm saying
Hmm.
is that there are also, even as far as productivity seems to be even better, right? Preferable.
Hmm. Yeah.
What I'm saying is that there are other metrics, which is like, okay, what about how happy is the person, or which also has metrics as far as how can this person sustain this level of productivity, right? So I'm just
Hmm.
calling out that there are other measures that are also very desirable, apart from also the mere productivity, which is also important. So it might be it would be better than that competition in many other ways that are also relevant in the workplace.
Yeah. Something to look into.
Like co-ops, like the studies that they say that co-ops, let's say as far as turnover, but as far as people's engagement and, let's call it, quote unquote, happiness, they're also, they are definitely have an edge over more traditional forms of organizing.
Yeah, 100%. So that's something to look into what they actually look at with this achievement deal. All right. Um, let's see. Experimenters have found that whereas cooperative individuals realistically perceive that some people are cooperative like themselves, while others are competitive, competitive individuals believe that everyone is like them and that it's human nature to compete. Interesting. Um, and then it goes into Kropotkin. We reviewed this mutual aid, but basically saying even natural selection has cooperation. Most of no contest is devoted to a systemic unraveling of what Kohn calls the four central myths of competition. Competition is unavoidable. Competition motivates us to do our best. We would cease to be productive if we didn't compete. Three, contests provide the best, if not only, way to have a good time. That's funny. And four, competition builds character and is good for self confidence. In the author's experience, he says that we do better across a multiplicity of goals, producing greater, more lasting satisfaction when we work in cooperative modes, balancing the needs of multiple stakeholders, right? And then he goes into this. I don't know if you all are familiar with Dr. Deming. Basically, uh, a while ago, I guess this is kind of there's some history here about Japan. Back in the 70s and even in the 80s, it was the stereotype of Japanese products and cars that they were bad. It's weird to think about that now because you think of Japanese cars as lasting very long. But back then, uh, they were, it was considered bad. This guy, Deming, went over there and he was the TQM guy. I forget where this is said in here, but the total quality improvement or management. And he brought it over there. And basically, a big part of that is anti-cooperative. I'm sorry, anti-competition. So you have this implemented and all of the the assembly lines that are over there and all this stuff. It's influential to us because that is the beginning of like a big influence. Like the Toyota way is an influence for the agile methodology. So, but that's like 20 years later. But that had its beginnings over with this guy. But basically, again, anti competitive, but being more cooperative. And then he goes into some stories about the whole area of Italy that's all about these small businesses that are all cooperative with each other. But I think this talking about and this book is one that I would like to review, as far as the limits of competition and trying to envision a world that doesn't prioritize competition. So I think it would be good for us to stop there. We are at the hour. So anybody have some comments? Any more comments about this?
I'm just gonna say that we're actually touching on a lot of topics that I'm actually madly curious about. It's like really fundamental, I think, to build my understanding of this way of organizing. So I think this is great.
Yeah, I really, I need to go look at this meta-analysis. I need to look at this book here by Cone, No Contest. Maybe hopefully it has an audio. Go through that. This would be like sacrilegious in a, you know, in a business school. Or, what's funny is you can almost look at this as um it's funny because when you read some of the books about economic strategy and stuff, they're always talking about the monopoly price, basically trying to find ways to collude without violating antitrust law. And so it's funny because cooperation is so beneficial that if big companies were to do it, it would be bad. But all the way up until there, it's like no, 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 competition. All of you workers, you need to be competing with each other. So obviously, you're going to be less efficient if you uh, work together, kind of thing. And really, the less efficientness is, oh, you're going to get more of the surplus. We don't like that. That's really what I think. So it's funny, a paradox here that we don't really think about.
Totally. That's one of the things that really cracks me up is that competition is what companies hate the most. They want to avoid it at all costs. That's why that you have M&A, right, happening, and why you have all this like sneaky collusion in the background. It's what I mean? If you're like the ultra capitalist guy, you hate competition, but people somehow try to flip it, right, which is just not true.
Yeah. One of my favorite books, I want to say it's The Economics of Strategy. Forget it, I haven't looked at it in a while, but we haven't reviewed it. But it's really basically a textbook, but it's really good. But it's one of those things when you're reading an economics book and you're like, oh, they think no one's going to read this. That's really the person authoring the book or the group authoring the book. It was like, yeah, no one's going to read this. So we're just going to be honest. And they just talk about collusion right in the book. Just like, oh, this is how you get to the monopoly price. And then they talk about ways to collude without communicating with each other. And then ways to form an oligopoly. And then, oh, you don't want to form a complete oligopoly. You want to go one step before that. And it's all game theory. It's just right there. I was
Oh my
like,
God.
yeah,
Right, like
I
that,
see
like the
this all the
straight,
time.
because there's always a lot of wink, right? But that sounds
It's
like no, they gave it the game away.
yeah, I'm reading. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's a heavy textbook or whatever, but it's just right there. And I see that all the time, in economics books. That the phrase the monopoly price. They'll talk about it like we think of monopoly as bad, right? And so you would think they're not going to have that phrase in a book and say This is how you get as close to that without triggering antitrust. This is right there for anyone to read. It's amazing. But yeah.
Peter Thiel also, and I think that the video is out there too, right? In his classes at Stanford, I think it is. I mean, he would just straight up say it, right? It's no, you want to be a monopoly. That's the goal, in fact. And he goes
Yeah.
on from there.
Yeah. So they won't say you want to be a monopoly because they're like, obviously, antitrust is going to kill you. They're going to get regulated if you're a monopoly. What you really want is for three of you to have the highest price possible, actually get to the monopoly price without being considered a monopoly. And then you can dominate the group, right? So let's just think we're in tech, right? Think of database. Well, I'm going to go back, but think of databases before MySQL is dominant. You had MySQL, you had Microsoft SQL Server in the middle, like all enterprise, small, medium, and you had Oracle on the top, and you had maybe DB2 from IBM or something like that. But they all Oracle's charging 100,000 of license, and then they're telling Microsoft, hey, you could charge $1,000, $2,000 or whatever, but you're going to get a lot of volume because it's going to be all the small, medium. So you all stay down there, don't come up here, and we're going to stay up here, and we'll all do volume. You're going to get your money. We're going to get our money from price, and leave us alone. And by the way, let's act like we're enemies. Yeah. So stuff like that. And you can do all of this without actually even playing golf with each other and telling each other. It actually can emerge and it still be the monopoly. Both of them are actually getting the monopoly price. But stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, the cooperation is also like, huge trade unions, and also the way you lobby, right? Like they all come together and use the same lobbying firms, right?
Oh, yeah. 100%.